MaGuS, if you're listening to this, there are so many people that would love to hear your story. Please contact me at podcast@aolunderground.com when you're ready to tell your story. Thanks.
Welcome to AOL. Welcome to AOL Underground.
Please state your handle and the years you're active on AOL.
Pat or JK, 1997 to 2001, though I maintained my website throughout the early 2000s.
And maybe you could explain your handle a little bit for those that don't know.
Sure. When AOL started, they only allowed you to have 5 usernames. And, my dad got AOL, and then he really didn't want to use up our usernames, so he made me and my brother share a username. So we had to come up with something. So we chose Pat for me and then JK for him. His name is Kyle, but you were limited to 10 characters. So he just used, JK was just like a handle he used in video games. So we just used that. A few months later, he actually let us have another username, and he got his own username. I kept Pat or JK just because it was memorable.
Cool. So when did you first use a computer?
So my dad was he was the president of the local computer club. We had a computer in our house for as long as I could remember. Like the first real memory I have of using a computer was probably playing the game Commander Keen from id Software. And my dad, he was super cheap, so we never had like a real video game system until, I was a little bit older, like a preteen or a teenager. So the first video game I played was like id Software games. And then he built me a computer. And I remember playing Doom and Quake and Duke Nukem 3D and all those other type of games that came out in the early 90s.
Nice. I have fond memories of those games. How did you end up on AOL?
Ooh, so I think that happened in 96 or 97, but I do remember my dad showing me the app. But like we'd had the internet before. Once we had AOL, it was like all in one everything, and that's for the rest of my teenage years, that's what we used.
Wait, so were you on BBS before that, or IRC or something?
I don't exactly know. I asked my dad. He's in his 80s now, and he insists that we had AOL. Like I lived in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and then we moved to Maryland. And we got AOL when we were in Maryland, but he thinks we had AOL in New Mexico, but we didn't. We had something else. I just remember whatever we had, it was very slow, and it was dial up. So I don't remember the exact service though. Once
you got on AOL, what happened?
Would mess around. And then I remember one day my friend Chris, he was a neighbor of mine, came over and he had one of those 3.5-inch floppies. And he was like, you got to check this out. On the floppy was a copy of AOL Hell. He installed it and then showed it around. And, we were just wowed. It was like, whoa, what is this? And it had all these crazy features. And, it seemed a little bit like forbidden software. I remember it had the loading screen where it was like...
That was Steve Case.
Oh, that was Steve Case? Okay. It had the guy, and then it had like that Photoshop, fiery background.
Yeah, the demon Steve Case on fire. That was version 3, I believe, like beta 3 or something. Right. Did it have the Dr. Dre intro song too?
Yeah, it had the Chronic, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. That was one of the most widely distributed ones. Okay, so it had the phishing, the punting, the mail bombs, all of that. And then did that make you want to make your own program or what?
It did, like, not immediately. I don't think it happened immediately. I think we messed around for a little bit. And then I had to undergo surgery for a hernia I had. And I was sort of like out of commission, just at home all by myself for like 4 or 5 weeks with nothing to do. And during that time, I learned to program. And initially I was trying to make a game. But then, we kept messing around with these progs. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should try to make one of these. Just kind of found my way to... originally, I think I found the AOL message boards. They had these official message boards for programming, and there was actually a forum specifically for AOL add-on development. And then, I found that. And then eventually I made my way to the private chats, but it was the official AOL forums. There was some guy, I think his handle was Genocide, and he was working on this thing called genozide.bas. And he asked, he's like, hey, can anyone beta test this for me? And I was like, oh, I'll try that out. It had all these different subroutines that would do different things like sending IMs, sending email. And, I remember being real excited about it. And like I kept bugging him about it. And eventually he got kind of pissed off. But it was really cool. It was sort of my introduction to getting something to work. It was neat.
So these forms, was like a keyword, or how'd you get to them?
It was some button inside the app. It might have been a keyword. Yeah, maybe you searched for a keyword and it loaded up this little form.
Was genocide the name? Was that the handle of the guy? I know that was the name of the file, but was that also the handle?
Yeah, it was his handle. His name was Genocide, and then he named his BAS file genozide.bas. That was sort of a popular thing to do back then. You would have your handle, and then you'd name the file you were working on after yourself.
I guess I didn't even know about this whole add-on forms thing. It's interesting because a lot of people just went to the private rooms. Was there more than one person creating like the BAS or base files?
That was the only file I got off of those forums. I think the official forums were just for people trying to make more commercial software. Like I remember people were selling Fader apps and people would buy them too. People were making money.
Wow. Interesting. I never even thought about like a marketplace for that stuff. That's interesting. Okay. You got the base file. You started testing it out. You said you could send IMs with it. What else could you do with it?
Oh, you could send email. You could it basically had subroutines to do everything you needed. Like it was a subroutine to get into a chat room, just anything you could think of. It wasn't, I guess, 100% complete, but it had all the things I needed to do at the time.
Cool. And so once you got your hands on that, it sounds like maybe it supercharged your programming or what?
After that, I think I made my own prog. It was sort of a FadeX clone. I don't think I sent it. I think I might have sent it to my buddy Chris and a few other people, but it wasn't widely distributed or anything like that.
You eventually ended up in some private rooms? Do you remember like some of the programs back then?
I do. So the ones I remember the most were obviously AOL Hell, and then there was the FadeX series, those Fate 2.5, 3.0, and then 0. I remember Havoc, which had the Metallica music. There was one called Men in Black, one called Pepsi. And I know there were others. Me and Chris would actually trade, the different apps we would get. But those 5 are probably the ones I remember the most.
Do you remember any exploits?
Probably the first exploit I remember was that profile glitch where you could put some text in your profile, and then when someone looked at your profile, their computer would freeze, and they'd have to reboot their computer. And I remember thinking that was kind of interesting that your computer could become, I guess, corrupted just by looking at a profile. And then I remember, of course, all the different IM exploits. You could send someone a bunch of IMs, and then the AOL would crash. Or there were certain things you could send them that would also just knock them offline.
Knowing what you know now about programming, what do you think was happening with that profile glitch and the computer freezing?
I don't know. Even now, it was weird because it was just text. It was text you would copy and paste into your profile. It wasn't anything special. It wasn't any computer code. It's kind of dumbfounding why that would happen. I mean, there had to have been some error with how they were rendering text.
I know sometimes if you made an infinite loop like in VB, you could lock your computer to the point where you couldn't use it. So maybe it was just the CPU was at 100 and there's nothing you could do.
Yeah, it's weird though because it was not computer code. It was regular text. I think there were some special characters, but even today it doesn't make any sense to me why it would do that.
You got the genocide.bas file. You're in the private rooms. You made some programs. You didn't really release them that much. You did release a couple of programs. Can you tell me about the API spy, why you made it and released it? So
what happened there, just backing up briefly, someone in contact, I had this website where I had all these Visual Basic examples people could use. And there was this guy that really liked my example, my website. He was the owner of, I think it was the AO Fire web ring. And he was he had this copy of the AIM sysop version, app, and it was basically the AIM for system administrators. And he's like, hey, I've got this, there's no progs written for it. If I send you this, will you make an app for it? And I was like, that sounds kind of cool. So he sent me this system administrator version of AIM, and I started making an app for it. And it was a real pain in the butt because there was no BAS files for this. So I had to do everything manually with a regular API spy where I was examining the window handles, and it was just really laborious. And as I was doing this, I sort of had this epiphany where it was wait a second, this is just all these windows are in a tree structure. I can write code if I have the initial window handle and I know what I want to do, say click a button or get some text, I could write code to do what I want to do. And I was this would make this so much faster. So I did a quick prototype where, I selected, an action like clicking a button or reading some text. And then, I dragged something onto the window and it generated the code. And then I tested that code and it worked. And I was like, wow, this is like so useful. This is like amazing. So it was while I was writing that prog that I came up with the idea for the API spy, because it was such a pain in the butt to write API code to do these actions. Like it took a long time. Like if you had a BAS file already, like you could make these programs no problem. But if you were doing something new, like it was really hard. So, I wrote this API spy, added a little bit more features, and I released it. And I kind of knew it would be popular just because, now you'd be able to do anything you wanted. You wouldn't have to rely on, subroutines that someone had previously written in a BAS file. So that was sort of what made this API spy cool. It could generate code to basically do anything you wanted to do.
Okay, so I'm still trying to follow here. So classically, you had to find the parent window, activate the parent window, and then you had to find all the child nodes, right? And get down to the object you wanted to like click. And you're saying your program, you could just click the object and it would go up the tree and then write the code?
Yeah, so in Windows, like it's not obvious, but every single window, it's in this tree structure with there's one parent window, which is I think like the operating system or something. Actually, the parent window is the application. So the top is the application, and then everything inside of the application is a child window. Whether it's a button, that's a window. Whether it's a dialogue, that's a window. And the button is going to be either a child of the dialogue or it's going to be a child of something else that's inside the dialogue. To write code, normally what you do is you have an API spy and you'd hover over like the object, like the button, and it would give you a window handle. But when you're writing code, you can't just say, okay, because the window handle is going to be different every time you run your application. So what you have to do is there's these API calls. They're called find window by child. There's several of them. And you need to find a window. Basically, you need to have its parent window. You'd have the button, and then you'd have to figure out, okay, this is the button. What's its parent button? What's the parent button above that? So it was just this very laborious process of using a spy. And the way the spy would work is you would just hover your mouse over a button, and it would tell you information about that button. It would tell you the button's window handle. It would tell you the window handle of the parent, the class name of the button, all this other stuff. And to find that button, to write the code, you'd have to use this find window function. And so the find window function for the application would be the very first call. And then you'd have a second call, which is like find window. I don't remember the exact second call, but it was another find window, and it would use the parent handle of the top application. So you just have all these calls to eventually find that button that you wanted to press.
Okay, yeah. Okay, cool. So that sounds super. I wish I would have known about that. I was just sitting there doing it manually and it took forever.
Yeah, so that's why this spy was popular, because you could just drag this ring onto whatever window you wanted, and it would generate all that code to find that button to click it.
So you made that one, released that, and then there was another program I came across called Find That Bas.
Yeah, so I had a website with all these, BAS files and Visual Basic examples, and there were several other popular sites. There was one site called K&K. On that site, like he would list all the BAS files, and then he'd have this weird report that would say what % of the file was copied from another file. And I always thought that was kind of neat. And he didn't release how he was doing that, so I don't know how he was doing that. But I was like, I could write a program to create these kind of reports, and it just seemed like a fun project. So that's what Find That Bas is. Like I wrote an app. You input a BAS file, and then you can input these other files, and then it will generate a report about what percentage of that initial file was copied from these other files.
Interesting. And do you remember the logic on how it determined like what %?
Vaguely. I remember I tried to handle, because obviously you can beat this kind of program if you just change the variable names. So I remember I did something like, I think I used placeholders. So you could rename the variables and it would still catch you. So it did several tricks to sort of get around things that people could do to, sort of obfuscate that they'd stolen the code. So it wasn't just like, checking routine against routine. It would break everything into a routine, and then it would sort of sort of try to normalize these routines, like changing the variable names. And I think it would change the loops all into the same type of loop. It would do several tricks. It wouldn't be 100% perfect, but it would try to fight against people who just tweaked the code slightly.
Interesting. And so sounds like maybe there was some like infighting between the people that created the files.
Yeah. So, and I know you had a picture of that Bofine guy, because there was there was one notable thing I remember. There was this guy Bofine that was, real popular back then, and he got in these fights with other people, and like I never had anything against him, but I believe this app was used like to sort of prove that he had stolen code from someone else. Like people were fighting with him, and there was this huge plagiarism scandal, and he got busted for like stealing code and then stealing the design for his website, and then he deleted everything and disappeared.
Wow. Probably came back as somebody else, right?
Yeah, probably.
AIM sysop thing. So you had a sysop version of AIM and then you made a BAS file based on it, or?
Yes. So someone, like, I don't know how this guy had it. Like, so he was the webmaster for this AOL Fire web ring, and he had all these connections, and somehow he had this copy of AIM that was the copy that was used by the system administrators. It was called the sysop AIM. And I don't know how he got it. And it was definitely different than the regular AIM, because when I tried it out, like all the windows were different. It just worked differently. I don't specifically remember any great features that it had, but yeah, it was just different.
And then he wanted a program to manipulate that one, or to like look at the incoming like packets and stuff.
Oh, he just wanted a prog for it, like, because yeah, he was using it, and he's like, none of the progs work. I need something. So I was like, yeah, sure. It just sounded like a cool project, so I told him sure, and then I made one for him.
Did you think about giving everybody this sysop version of AIM, or?
Oh, no one asked me for it. That's a good question. I think it later got distributed, like, because so the app I made, I put on my website. It was called AIM Flash, and it was actually the second app I made that got featured on other websites. So other people had this version of AIM. I don't know how people got it. It must have been on other websites too. I do remember it did have some exploits that the original version didn't, because I named the app AIM Flash because you could actually make the chat rooms flash a different color. So that was one of the features, and it would work for you could do it in this version, and it would work for the regular versions too. So you could make the chat room flash different colors.
Ooh, that's really interesting. That's really cool. Nice. Do you remember any other programs you made?
I made a lot of non-AOL programs, but for the ones for AOL, I made a prog that didn't really go anywhere. I made the API spy, the AIM Flash program. I made a Fader program. Yeah, that's about it for AOL. I made and then I made a bunch of regular like Visual Basic programs. I made a Scan That Bas program. I made a program called Shapeoform, which allowed you to basically make your windows different shapes. That was sort of a fad for a while. Like if you wanted, like normally a window is just a square, but if you wanted like a fancy window that had like bevels or like was a weird, like a circle or something, you could use this program and it would let you draw the form shape that you wanted.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's really cool. I forgot how I did it. I think I just made like I just made like the whole form an image or something like that, and then I dragged stuff over it. But that's really cool. In high school, from our pre-show notes, you took an independent study course in programming. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so I went to sort of an artsy high school, and they didn't have a lot of computer programming classes. Like there was this one class I tried to take. It was originally going to be a class in C++, but then at the beginning of the year, they said only 4 kids signed up for it. So it was just going to be an independent study in computer programming. It was kind of a bust in that, so it was the 4 of us, and then they wouldn't let us install anything on any of the computers. So, we would come to school and then we just kind of mess around and play Flash games. And then at the end of the year, for the final project, I turned in my API spy. I'm like, this is what I made. And
that's hilarious. That's really funny. I bet you got a good grade on it too.
Yeah, I got an A.
So why'd you decide to host a VB6 archive on your website?
One reason was I just needed material for the website. And I was like, well, I have all this stuff that I'd created. Maybe people will find it useful. So I created these archives, and I just kept them up. And I noticed they were like a few years later, I noticed they were still getting views. And I started getting emails from people in India and China. People there were apparently using Visual Basic 6 to learn how to program. and they were finding my website, and it was kind of neat. It was like these examples were getting a second life.
That's really cool. Were people also submitting code for the website?
No, it was just people using the examples. People submitted code up until around 2004.
So they did submit code at one point, like examples.
Oh yeah. I started when I started the site in I think 98 or 99, and I put up my own code, and right away people started submitting their own stuff, and I was like, oh, this is kind of neat. So I would just I would review what they submitted, and then I would post it up, and after a while I had quite a lot of files. And even after I stopped writing my own stuff, I still got submissions, and I would still update the site. And it was up until around 2004 that I stopped getting submissions.
That's pretty cool, like your own little GitHub.
Yeah. Because there was no GitHub back then. So, I mean, the only way to get files was, through these third-party websites, people hosting their own website with stuff on it.
On your website, you blogged about, some of the Fate programs, and you wrote a whole article about breaking the encryption on one of the Fate programs. Can you tell me about the Fate programs and then why you decided to do that and about the encryption and stuff?
Sure. So, back in the day, those FateX, which was a rather popular prog, and was FateX like the most popular one after AOL Hell? Like, that's sort of my memory.
Yeah, it's so popular. I remember hating it because I was so jealous. Like, it was just everywhere. I was just like, why is this one program so popular? Like, I don't get it. But for whatever reason, it was everywhere.
Yeah, that's my memory too. It was everywhere, and he would release it, and he would have all this new art, and all these artists seemed to work with him, and I guess to protect against people stealing it, he encrypted all the files. So if you wanted, you could still probably get the art from it if you posted it in a chat room and then just copied it, but it was all the files for it were encrypted. And, years later, I was just going through some old files, and I found FateX, and I found all these encrypted files. And I had taken a class in encryption back in college. And before the 70s, all the forms of encryption were pretty easy. Not easy, but they were pretty breakable. And, I saw these files, and I'm like, he probably didn't know about modern encryption techniques. I could probably crack these files. And so I looked at them, and, sure enough, there was sort of some repeating patterns going on. And I'm like, okay, I could definitely crack these. And so I went to work, and, I was sort of able to deduce that he was using, it's called a Vigenère cipher. The most simple form of a cipher is a Caesar cipher, where every character is just offset by some amount. And a Vigenère cipher is the same way, except for there might be 4 characters, and there's a word like fate. The F is like the 6th letter of the alphabet. So every character would be offset by 5, and then the A, everything's offset by 1, and then the T offset by whatever T is, and E. And so that's how the Vigenère cipher works. And so I looked at this and saw the repeating pattern. I knew it probably wasn't a Caesar cipher where everything is offset by a set amount. I went to work, and I was able to break the cipher. And he was using different ciphers for different files. I think one of the files was fate. One of the files was clearly a date, and I deduced that was his birthday, because he had said in the app that he was 16, and it's like, oh, and then there's this birthday, and it's like, okay, this is probably his birthday. And based on his birthday and other things he said in the app, I was actually able to figure out who he was. And I even sent him an email, and he actually confirmed that, I figured out who he was. It was kind of neat.
He confirmed his poor OPSEC by using his birthday for the cipher.
Yeah.
That's really funny. So wait, but how'd you find his email?
So I think I found his Facebook, and I got the email from there. I don't remember 100% though.
Nice. And so which files were encrypted?
It was all the external files. So he had the regular app, and then there was all these files that were basically input files to the app. So the app had all these ASCII art files, for scrolling ASCII art in chat rooms. And there were hundreds of these files. I guess he didn't, it makes sense not to store all these inside of the application. So everything that was external was encrypted. So it was, and that was 95% ASCII art. So it was all these ASCII art files were encrypted. And then there are a few other files that were encrypted. I don't remember exactly what they were. I think they were just config files though. Yeah, they were config files.
That's really interesting. I haven't heard of other people doing that. I guess it makes sense if you decompile it, you still don't have the files, right? Because that's what people would do.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Like if you wanted to add stuff to the app later, you wouldn't want to have to recompile it. So
Okay, cool. So you found him and he congratulated you.
okay, hold on. Now it's coming back to me. So I didn't email him. Like I found him and I made an article on it, and then he emailed me. That's how it happened. Yeah, there we go. I found his Facebook and his friends, but I decided not to reach out to him. I thought it would be weird. And then he emailed me and told me he'd read my article, and then he confirmed that, yeah, I had found him.
That's great. Yeah, actually, you've written some good articles on your site too. I saw the one about like AOL, and most recently I saw a YouTube video on Vader Fader.
Sure. So years ago, like back in like 2013, Mark Zuckerberg's old teenage website was uncovered, and it was found to still be online. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So I took a look at it, and on his website, he had some progs, and they were both faders. And I was like, oh, this is kind of neat. And so I downloaded them, and I tried to get them to work, but they wouldn't run. And it was because they needed AOL to be running in order for them to load. Like if you tried to start them, they would just pop up with an error message that says AOL must be running. Sorry, you can't use this. So I was like, oh, that's a bummer. And I tried everything I could to get AOL to load up, but because there was nothing to connect to, it just wouldn't run. So I wound up sort of, I made an article on, what I'd found, and then I just sort of forgot about it. And then a few weeks ago, I was told about this project called Nina, where they have these servers that you can connect to, and then you can get the old AOL 4.0 software to work. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I downloaded it. Or no, I downloaded AOL 4. I set up all the parameters to connect to the Nina servers, and then I connected and it worked. And I was like, wow, this is real. Like, so someone from Nina actually told me about this, and I thought they were trying to prank me at first. And when I saw it was real, like the first thing that came to my mind was these old Mark Zuckerberg apps. I'm like, oh, I can finally see what these things look like. I went and re-downloaded them, and then I loaded them up, and there they were. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. It's sort of like a forgotten part of history, I guess, because he never talks about his AOL days. Like if you read any article on him, he'll talk about, when he was 12, and then he'll skip to like, when he was in college. So, and these are clearly when he's learning to program, because they're not that great, which is probably why he's skipping over them. But it's kind of cool to see, because, they're nothing special, but it sort of shows you can, the most successful developer, started out just like everyone else.
Yeah, for real. That's crazy. Did he have any other programs on there?
He had some, I think he had some web apps that were Java, but I don't think they worked.
Why'd you leave AOL?
I started college in the fall of 2000. So, I didn't live on campus until my junior year, but I was spending all my time at school, and I had all this schoolwork, and I just sort of slowly lost interest, especially since I just had so much else to do. In fact, I was looking at like some archived versions of my news site, and it's pretty clear by 2001 that that I'd lost interest.
After you left, being on AOL and stuff, what happened then?
So, I left AOL, and then, I was working on a computer science degree. Originally I was going to get into game programming, but the game industry is crazy, and I sort of shied away from that. I went and got a master's degree in computer graphics, and then I sort of I graduated and got a job doing government contracting, and then I sort of made my way to the web development world, and that's sort of what I've been doing since then.
I noticed you had posted a video about something called Subpixel Snake. Can you talk about that?
I had an idea for I try to blog at least once or twice a year, and I had an idea to do this illusion thing, and it didn't make sense as a blog post because it was it required a video. So I made a video on that, and that gained a good amount of traction. I'm like, oh man, that's kind of cool. I need to do a follow up. I've been taking pictures of of screens because I got a macro lens for Christmas, and I was like, oh, I should do something with subpixels. And then I came up with the idea for doing a Snake game. I'm like, oh, that would be a cool concept. I'll do a subpixel version of the game Snake.
Wait, what's a subpixel?
Oh, so a subpixel is so every pixel on your monitor is made up of subpixels. The most popular formation is called the RGB stripe. So it'd be a red, green, and blue light in a stripe formation. And there's actually a whole bunch of different subpixel geometries. But the idea behind subpixel snake was it would use those red, green, and blue lights to be part of the snake. So you could make a super small version of snake that sort of worked with the subpixels inside of the pixels on your monitor. I just thought it was a cool idea, and I made it. And then in order to see it, I needed to buy a microscope. So I bought a microscope. I looked at my computer, and then I saw that it didn't work. And it didn't work because I was using the sRGB color space, which is, in most programming languages, they just call it the RGB values, or it's the RGB function. And I found out that monitors can display more colors than the sRGB color space. And in order to make the game work, I had to use a different color space to get those red, green, and blue lights to light up correctly. So I made a video on this, and it did really, really well. It was kind of interesting.
So what's next? Like Subpixel Doom or?
I don't know, actually. I might do a follow-up to the snake game. Yeah, I think I might try to make some more videos. It's kind of fun. So that's sort of the thing I'm doing right now.
How do you think AOL impacted your life?
Definitely impacted it for the better. It definitely changed the direction I was going in. Like prior to AOL, I've been really into writing. Like I was a member of my school's journalism. I was in the journalism club, and I'd write for the school newspaper, and I liked writing fiction. So I kind of wanted to be a writer. And then after AOL, like I just got so into programming. It was clear to me. I was like, okay, I definitely need to do software. And so it just completely changed the direction of my life. And I think for the better. I think, the journalism industry has not done well over the last 20 years.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. Cool. Is there anything else you want to share today?
Nothing that I can think of. I guess if anyone's interested, I've restarted this YouTube channel, and I'm just doing crazy projects on it. So they can, if anyone's interested, they can follow me there.
Okay. I'll put it in the show notes, and your blog is patorjk.com, and you're also at patorjk on YouTube. Is that right?
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on the show today. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Hack the planet. Hack the planet.
Welcome to cyberspace.